Hello, welcome to Jason the Old Millennial. My name is Jason. I'm speaking to you here in my basement in the great state of Kansas. And today I am continuing or finishing my list of top 20 movies of the 1970s. So I'm doing number 5 to number 1. So these are my top 5 movies. Obviously, very excellent movies. Anytime you get to the top 5, any of the decades, I mean, that's definitely getting way up there on my favorite movies of all time. And 70s is a pretty good decade. Um, in fact, yeah, my favorite movies on here, and another top 10 movies on here. So yeah. Uh, so further ado, I'll go number 5. Uh, One of the all-time classic franchises starts with Star Wars, uh, also known as Star Wars Episode 4: A New Hope. But I just call it Star Wars, just easier to say. Um, the original came out in 1977. What can you say about this movie? I mean, the most well-known, most everybody grew up watching Star Wars that I knew, and it was one of the hugest movies that come out, of course, when it came out. And when I grew up in the '80s, I watched Star Wars, and it was like my favorite movie of all time. I looked at some pictures recently of me when I was a kid, and I had Star Wars posters on my wall. And I used to, even when I was like a teenager, I used to always make top lists, like top 10, top 100 lists of my favorite movies, or something, anyways. And I had a picture of, for some reason, I had a picture of my top 10 favorite movies, and Star Wars was number one. So, I mean, I was a huge Star Wars fan. And just, I think I love about Star Wars is just, to me, it was like the first movie that showed this idea of world building, which I absolutely love, and I absolutely love sci-fi and fantasy movies. So I love the idea that there's this whole world created that has its own history, and I love reading about it and kind of learning the history, even though it's not real, and it's just fascinating because I love history too. And so just love reading and kind of learning about these different cultures in this new world. Of course, in Star Wars, there's different aliens and whatnot, and it's just a great classic story of this empire, and then these rebels are trying to fight against this empire. And it's got one of the greatest bad guys of all time, Darth Vader, with that black, you know, outfit and the cloak. It's so iconic and such a great design for a bad guy character. And you got this great story of this Luke, this boy who, feels like he wants to do something significant in his life. He's just a poor farmer kid, orphan, basically, raised by his uncle and aunt. And then you find out that, oh no, actually he's got this destiny, and he's like the chosen one that's going to save the galaxy, I guess, against the Empire, and that he actually has this, his father's actually a Jedi, and now he's a Jedi, and he's going to be trained, and he's going to have a significant role in this. In fact, and then you find out later movies, of course, even more of the big role he has in saving everything. Anyways, love that story of, we all, I think, feel that way. Like, man, it'd be cool if someone came and said, oh, you're a chosen one. You have this great destiny. Anyway, so it's a great story in that way. Pretty good paced movie, I think. Yeah, so going from one scene to another to the action scenes, and then that final scene with the starfighters going down into the trenches of the Death Star, getting fired at. That's such a great scene. Uh, Must have been mind blowing when it came out. It was cool when I was a kid. I still think such a cool scene, in destroying the Death Star. Such a great scene. Um, I love about Star Wars is that it kind of almost matches. I was thinking it matches like almost samurai with this Jedi is almost like samurais, so almost kind of matches in samurai type genre movies, and then almost kind of has a western feel to it with Han Solo, and he's kind of this looks like a gunslinger type, like so it almost has like this old western feel and a samurai feel mixing together. Of course, it's a sci-fi movie, so I love that mixture of genres in there. I think do really really well. And I just love the Jedi's. Jedi's are just a cool concept, and the lightsabers are really cool to watch when they light up. And there's not any good real Jedi fight scenes in this one. They come later, but I love that whole concept of that idea of the Jedi's, this ancient order that's like instinct almost. and he's like the last of the Jedi's. Yeah, so all of that makes this one of the great sci-fi movies of all time and great franchises, and really influenced others in the future. So definitely had to put that in my top five. So that's number five, Star Wars. Number four is a movie that actually is a movie I've only really sort of learned to love recently, and it's one of the biggest movies of all time. It's The Godfather, at number four on my list. Um, Growing up, of course, I never watched Godfather. Never a Godfather fan. I think I watched it once when I was a teenager and didn't think much of it. It was like I thought there was a couple good scenes and obviously some good acting in there. But I never really, it's kind of a long movie, and I'm not really big on gangster type movies. Mafia movies aren't my thing necessarily. Um, and I thought maybe it was kind of an overhyped movie. And then a couple years ago, I want to say, on Netflix, they showed like all three Godfather movies, and I don't know, I was like, I should rewatch these movies, because they're such, uh, biggest critically acclaimed movies are. They're always in the top five of any big movie list I've ever seen, and oftentimes number one, people's favorite movie of all time. So I was checking it out on Netflix and watching the first one. Like I really got into it. Like I was kind of surprised by how much I got into that story. And afterwards, I was like, "Wow, this is a really good movie." And I watched it several times since. Of course, I got the Blu-ray, and I think what I love is the story of Michael. I really enjoy that idea that he's born in this mafia family, but he doesn't want to really be in the mafia. He doesn't want to be associated necessarily with that. Um, but then when his father almost, spoilers I guess for the movie, but his father almost gets killed, his love of his family and of his father and his loyalty to his family causes him to get involved, even though he never wanted to get involved. And I love that he gets pulled into this mafia world and ends up becoming the new mafia boss of this family, the Don of the family, and how that rise from, not wanting to be in there to being the leader, basically. It's such an interesting idea and so well done in the movie. And then I just say the acting is it's maybe one of the best acting movies I've ever seen. I mean, great group of actors. Al Pacino is so good as Michael. Should have won the Oscar for Best Actor. He was, I think, too much. I think he was much, much better than Marlon Brando, who won the Oscar for Best Actor. And Marlon Brando feels like he's not in the movie that much, really. He has like one big scene at the beginning, and that's about it. Al Pacino throughout is really carries the movie, and really it's his journey. And Al Pacino is so good. I don't know. He has this interesting way of he talks softly a lot in this movie, but yet the way he talks, he still has this intensity about him that he still like you're still kind of scared of him sometimes, or still like don't want to mess with him when he makes kind of threats. And I think he does such a good job with that. I love when he says to his brother Frito, you know, I love you, you're my brother, but never take sides against the family. And the way he says it, it's like, man, you can tell he's very serious when he says that, and don't go against what he says. Um, and so I love that about Al Pacino. There's one scene like at the end, where he tells okay, yeah, ask him if he's killed these people or something like that, and he says, don't ask me about my business. And then he does yell, "Don't ask me about my business," and it's great. Like it's like, man, what a powerful, you know, performance of going from soft to loud. Anyways, but yeah, I love Al Pacino. But then also, um, you got James Caan. I think is great as the older brother, the hothead, and John Cazale is Fredo, kind of the idiot brother. Um, and then Robert Duvall and his character as the lawyer, family lawyer. I mean, so great actors, and their performances are just so great. Of course, Marlon Brando has a couple good scenes in there. Um, those are some of them. Oh, Diane Keaton, of course, great as the girlfriend. And even some of the smaller character actors, very good. But just the scenes where they're just sitting around talking, it's just like I love those scenes because it's like, man, these are just master class actors, really acting these characters really so well. I love the dynamic of yeah, like I said, the older brother, this hothead, and then the next brother is this idiot, and then you get Michael, who's the younger brother, but yet he's actually best for leadership, anyways. But yeah, so I love the acting. The whole story is very interesting, I think. And yeah, and I kind of just learned to love it just recently, anyways, and that's why it's number four on my list. Also, great music. Music is fantastic in it. So yeah, so Godfather number four. Number three is probably my favorite comedy of all time, funniest movie of all time. It's called Young Frankenstein, starring Gene Wilder as the lead as Frederick Frankenstein, or Frankenstein, as he's really known as. Of course, he actually wrote the story of this, and it's a bit of a spoof movie off of the Frankenstein movies. If you ever watch those, I've never really seen the Frankenstein movies, but I kind of know the famous scenes. So when there are scenes that are spoofing, I kind of get it. I think are pretty clever. Um, I'm forgetting the name of the director, but the great director is one of the greatest comedy directors of all time. Um, I don't know why I can't remember his name, but it just he does a lot of the spoof movies at that time, like Blazing Saddles, and later on, Spaceballs and Robin Hood Men in Tights. Probably the greatest comedy spoof director of all time. I'm forgetting his name on top of my head. Um, but yeah, so he directs and I think co-writes it with Gene Wilder. And Gene Wilder's so funny. He's my favorite, like up there with one of my favorite comedic actors of all time. And this is one of the funniest performances as the Frankenstein. Kind of, he's the grandson, I believe, of the original Frankenstein who created the Frankenstein monster, and then he's trying to get away from his family because he doesn't want to be associated with his grandfather because I guess people see him as a crackpot or as dangerous. So he kind of put a bad, you know, made the Frankenstein name kind of a bad thing. So he calls himself Frankenstein to try to get away from the Frankenstein name, which is pretty hilarious. But then he kind of ends up following in his grandfather's footsteps, gets his grandfather's mansion and his laboratory where he did experiments, and he gets to inherit all that. And then you get Igor's grandson or whatever, who was also a hunchback named Igor, or I think he calls himself, or maybe it's Igor, but he calls himself Igor. And that guy's performance, now I'm forgetting his name. I've never seen him really before. The guy plays Igor, but man, he's absolutely hilarious in this movie. Maybe kind of steals some scenes in there. Very kind of goofy looking guy, goofy looking actor, but very funny physically. And then Terry Garr is the pretty assistant to Frankenstein. Gosh, I can't remember any names on top of my head. I didn't prepare. And then the Frau Brokler scenes is just so hilarious. The Frau Brokler and the horses neigh every time. And that actress just passed away this last year. Absolutely hilarious. Probably my favorite performance of her is just absolutely hilarious performance. Yeah, throughout. So I mean, it's just so funny. Gene Wilder so good at being going from 0 to 100 when it comes to excite. You know, he has this very nervous energy about him. When he gets angry and he starts yelling, and it's so hilarious how he does that. Especially the scene where he finds out that Igor put the wrong brain in the Frankenstein monster, and he's trying to figure out what brain he put in him, and he goes from very calm to then very angry and choking him, and it's so hilarious. Like my favorite scene in that movie, one of the funniest of all time. And like spoof movies, there's a lot of silly humor in there, but it works. I watched it recently, and it still makes me laugh so hard, even though I've seen it so many times. Yeah, so definitely have to check Young Frankenstein out. It's one of the funniest movies of all time. Sorry, I can't remember anybody's name on that one. Uh, so number two, one of my favorite movies of all time, definitely like a top 10 favorite movie of all time, is the sports underdog story Rocky, starring Sylvester Stallone. Um, I love this movie since I was a kid. Just love Sylvester Stallone's Rocky character, the performance. Such a great, likable character, and the romance between him and Talia Shire, who's also in The Godfather. She's good in that movie too. Playing his love interest, and that's just kind of a sweet, like two outsiders. Don't seem like they belong together, but yet they fall in love, and there's a good story there. Um, Trying to think of her name now. I can't think of anybody's name. He yells at the end of the movie. um, and just love the whole underdog story of he's just a nobody fighter, but then he gets this incredible lifetime chance of getting to compete against the one of the greatest fighters, a fictional fighter, but Apollo Creed, and getting to get in the ring with him, and the idea that he has absolutely no chance, but yet he trains, he gets his gritty boxing coach Mickey, brilliantly by that actor, I think named Burt something. Should have won the Oscar for Best Supporting Actor. Such a great character, Mickey. That voice and the why don't you let her train you, Rocky? Love his love when he yells at him. So many great. Of course, the montage of him going from not barely able to run to then running up those famous stairs in Philadelphia, and eating those eggs in the morning. Incredible montage scene of him training to be for the fight. But I just love that character. He's so unsure of himself, and yet he's supposed to be this tough guy. He's a boxer. He's of course very good, in shape, Sylvester Stallone for the role, and yet very unsure about this fight, and yet he trains and believes in himself, and ends up going toe to toe with the great one of the greatest fighters, or at least at that time, Apollo Creed. And then the whole fight scene at the end, how that kind of ends up. He almost wins it and all that. Yeah, spoilers for that movie. You haven't seen it. And just the ending is so uplifting. It's such one of those great feel good movies that I love watching so many times. Performances are great. Sylvester Stallone, again, I think should have won the Oscar for Best Actor. I thought his role was so good in this character. So deep and vulnerable, this character, and he does such a good job. He had to find an actor who's physically fit enough to look like a boxer, which he does, plus have those great scenes like with his girlfriend or with Mickey, or and all that. And he does such a great job. Of course, so many iconic scenes with like the punching the frozen ribs in the frozen locker or whatever. The running, all that stuff. It's such one of the greatest movies of all time. I've watched so many times, still love it so much. So that's Rocky at number 2 on my list. So it goes to number 1, favorite movie of the 1970s. I'm gonna say favorite movie of all time. Absolutely love this movie. Great. I love musicals, and this is the greatest musical to me. Fiddler on the Roof, I believe came out in 1971. I believe Rocky came out in 1976, if I remember right. Won Best Picture. This came out, I think, 71, around there. Should have won Best Picture. Greatest movie to me all time. Story about this poor milkman, Tevye, and kind of different things happen in the movie, but I think the most interesting storyline is between his 3 daughters and his 3 oldest daughters. They're getting to an age where they're going to get married, and it's this Jewish culture, like in the Russia area, like early 1900s, I believe. Antitevka is the name of the town, and there's so much Jewish tradition. If you know the Jewish religion, not that I'm an expert, but from what I understand, from what I've seen, is that they're so into tradition. Like, this is the way we've always done it, and we don't change, and we're always going to do it this way. And there's all these things you have to do. You have to do it right, or you're going to be ostracized maybe. And so part of the tradition is that you have a matchmaker who makes a match between, who comes up with a suitable husband or wife, for somebody. And then the parents usually, or the father usually, is the one who says, yeah, my daughter's going to marry this person. Of course, you don't get to choose who you marry. Basically, your dad chooses who you're going to marry if you're a girl. And there's a matchmaker that kind of comes up with a match, and then the father agrees to it. And that's how, it's been done for a long time. Anyways, and so we kind of get into this, these 3 oldest daughters, but they really wanted to, marry someone that they love, and they're kind of scared of, just being chosen somebody, what they don't like them. And so then that kind of happens with the 3 oldest daughters. Each one kind of go against tradition. And so the whole movie is about going against tradition, and the father Tevye having to decide, how far can I go and still feel like I'm, not going against my Jewish faith, which is the most important thing, in his life. And so it's interesting when the first one comes and he's like, well, this is going against tradition, but yeah, I want my daughter to be happy. So he'll agree to it. And the second one is a little more difficult situation, and he doesn't really want to agree with it, but then, he finally struggles with that and kind of agrees with it. Anyways, I'm kind of spoiling a little bit of the movie plot, Then the third one goes, the third daughter wants to marry someone outside the faith, and that's going too far. You can't marry outside the faith, and he can't agree to that. He can't bend the rules that far. Anyways, and I love that idea of like struggling with your faith, with your tradition, and kind of going against, making a hard decision, basically of, I want my daughters to be happy, but yet I can't go against my Jewish faith. So how do I compromise those two things? And it does such a good job. And Topol is the name of the actor who plays Tevye. It's really the only major role he's ever been in, and his performance is so magnificent. He should have won the Oscar for Best Actor. His and he's so many emotions go through this movie. There are some funny parts that are very funny, and he can do some Topol as Tevye can do some really funny things in the movie that make me laugh so much. And then there's so many sad moments that make me like kind of cry, that he has to do these hard things in the movie, and you see the pain in his eyes. Like, he has such a great face for when something painful happens, and it just makes you sad when you look at him when something happens, like one daughter has to leave or whatnot, and seeing him go through those emotions is so great. The movie to me just, it makes you mad, it makes you sad, it makes you happy, it makes you laugh. It gets me through all the emotions, and it's so wonderfully directed. Norman Jewison, the director, such a good direction. Movie shot beautifully, won the Oscar for cinematography, really shot beautifully. John Williams did the musical score and won an Oscar, I think his first Oscar for writing a musical score. Musical score is great. Besides all the singing and actually music, some iconic songs in there, Tradition, If I Were a Rich Man, Matchmaker, Do You Love Me, Sunrise, Sunset, Havala. There's so many beautiful songs in there, and sung very wonderfully. And a lot of the actors aren't well-known actors at all, but they do the performances just perfect, I think. And yeah, every time I watch this movie, I just get left with such a great feeling. Like I watched something special. Even though I've seen it so many times, it still hits me really hard every time I watch it. And that's why Fiddler on the Roof, to me, is the best movie ever made. My favorite movie. Even if you don't like musicals, man, I have to watch Fiddler on the Roof. It's so many good things in here. Yeah, it's number one favorite movie, Fiddler on the Roof, of the 1970s. So that's my list of 1970s. I did some other videos, doing the other movies on my list. So please feel free to comment on what you think about my list, or especially this top 5 and my number 1. If you like these movies or you've seen them, I'd love to read the comments and see what your favorite movies are. And just, yeah, thank you for watching this video, and thank you to all my subscribers for supporting me. I really appreciate all of you, and just thank you and have a good day.